Hello class, this is Firefighter Safety and Survival, Chapter 5, Implementing Training and Certification Standards. This chapter discusses the importance of standards for training, qualifications, and certification, the differences in training requirements between volunteer firefighters and career firefighters, training methods, and requirements for initial training, certification, and in-service training. The objectives we're going to cover in this chapter are: we will explain the national standards for training, qualifications, and certification. We will describe the purpose and advantages of credentialing for emergency responders and identify ways to use cognitive learning skills and apply them to an effective psychomotor lesson plan. We will also explain the advantages of the professional qualification standards with regard to safety, list the components of a job performance requirement, describe some of the differences in training requirements between volunteer firefighters and career firefighters, as well as state to state and the effects on safety overall. We will describe how the methods of training should be adjusted for the various risk scenarios you may encounter, describe how the Fire and Emergency Services Higher Education, or FESHE model, combines training and education into one complete package. And we will explain the advantages of a tiered system of certification and how it could improve safety. Today's career firefighter applicant is not a local neighborhood kid with no training. Today's career firefighter applicants may have more education than established firefighters and may have moved in from out of state. Relocation has a significant impact on emergency services. There are problems when emergency responders try to obtain a job in another region, and many training certifications are not recognized by other states. There are different classifications that exist, and the general public may have expectations of us that at times we cannot meet. For EMS, standard of care is defined as the care of a person and what they would expect to receive in a similar medical crisis in a similar area. Standard of care differs from region to region. It is common for ambulances in some areas to do everything that an emergency room will do, but in other regions they just drive to the hospital. What happens is just as important as where it happens. One very important example would be cardiac arrest, because these incidents are very good at chain of survival. The chain of survival does not take location into account. It has to be in place when you need it. There is a vast distance in both training and certification for firefighters in the United States. The American Heart Association says 5 things must go right to have the best chance to survive sudden cardiac arrest. First is immediate recognition of cardiac arrest and activation of the emergency response system. Second is early cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR. Third is rapid defibrillation. Fourth is effective advanced life support. And fifth is integrated post-cardiac arrest care. The struggles between states and the federal government have been in existence since the Civil War. Current heated debates are speed limits, death penalty, gun control, and gay marriage, just among many examples. Many states, such as New Hampshire, passed state sovereignty resolutions, quote unquote, that protest intrusion by federal government into state issues regarding 10th Amendment rights. The federal government keeps the states in line with the promise of tax dollars. Highway funds are sometimes withheld or at least threatened from states that have differing opinions on maximum speed limits. Federal grant money for the fire service is dependent on following federal rules and regulations such as the National Incident Management System, or NIMS, compliance, and the National Fire Incident Reporting System reporting. Struggles between states and the federal government have been in existence since the Civil War. Current heated debates range with, among others, speed limits, the death penalty, gun control, and gay marriage. Many states, such as New Hampshire, passed a, quote, state sovereignty resolutions, quote, that protest intrusion by federal government into state issues regarding the 10th Amendment rights. The federal government keeps the states in line with the promise of tax dollars. Highway funds are sometimes withheld or at least threatened from states that have differing opinions on maximum speed limits, for instance. Federal grant money for the fire service is dependent on following federal rules and regulations, such as the National Incident Management System, or NIMS, compliance, and National Fire Incident Reporting System, or NFIRS reporting. More cooperation by emergency services on a national level has the potential to improve service, opportunities, and the safety of emergency responders. History has proven that annexation, response areas, contracts, mutual aid, fire districts, and regional disaster responses blur the geographical lines, if not completely erase them. Differences in both requirements and terminology make direct comparisons of initial fire training and certification processes in the United States extremely difficult. States make changes fairly often based on decisions by their governing bodies and suggestions by their constituents. Department drills vary from department to department with no set standard. Some departments follow specific curricula and others just meet. The result of not being able to find equivalent firefighters in two different states means complete reciprocity is rare. There should be standard responses to emergencies, which is Initiative 11, and they should be handled by similarly trained professionals, which is Initiative 5. Many leaders in fire and emergency services are working to bring certifications and training to common ground. Organizations formed for this purpose include the Fire and Emergency Services Higher Education, which is FESHE, F-E-S-H-E, the International Fire Service Accreditation Congress, which is the IFSAC, and the National Board on Fire Service Professional Qualifications, which is NBFSPQ, or because of the difficulty of that acronym, they're more often referred to as the Pro Board. These organizations help provide the components of what is becoming a national framework for education and certification. The initial training requirements include basic training, and that is the first piece of common ground. And what we teach, and in terms of what we teach, if basic training requirements were the same nationwide, we would well be on our way to a standardization across the nation. Initial training not only involves what we teach, but how we teach it. One common feature of the fire service for initial training is the adaptation of the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA 1001, which is the standard on firefighter professional qualifications, Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2. NFPA standards are intentionally recognized, adopted, readily available, and reviewed regularly. The professional qualification series of standards are written as job performance requirements that describe the performance required to accomplish a specific duty. The standardization of the JPRs ensures that students learn both the knowledge and skills necessary for the job. Publishers of fire training materials used in the NFPA standards to develop the text, curricula, and supplemental training aids they produce for the fire service. The standard includes the knowledge, skills, and resources to meet requirements. Many educational processes are based on learning domains as a result of research by Benjamin Bloom and his associates. Please read more about that in your text. Bloom's taxonomy is that people learn through the following domains: cognitive, which is memorization; psychomotor, which is physically doing; and affective, which is feelings and values. In 2001, Anderson and Crotwell modernized Bloom's taxonomy with regard to the cognitive aspect and defined 6 specific levels of learning: remembering, understanding, and applying. The other 3 are 4, 5, and 6, which is analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Once a firefighter has completed initial training, many become certified. By meeting a minimum standard, it ensures that a curriculum can be developed that puts an emphasis on completing tasks using safe practices. Career firefighter basic training means that career firefighters are normally certified, and time requirements may vary greatly, 200 hours to over 400 hours, because many add classes to the NFPA 1001 training. Now let's talk about reciprocity. Firefighters who wish to relocate have a difficult time transferring certifications because training is not standardized from state to state. Now let's talk about volunteer firefighter basic training. Some states certify the firefighters with a testing process, whereas other states register them for participation in a basic level training class. Some chiefs feel that if the initial training is too much of a burden, no one would volunteer. Other chiefs require that the exact same certification for a volunteer firefighter should exist because they respond to the same emergencies as career firefighters. Emergency responders can be forced into difficult situations on their first event. Some say that if firefighters are being trained to NFPA standards, they should be tested on them. Certification needs to be attainable for volunteers who have other communities, and the process needs to be reviewed often. Now let's talk about in-service training requirements. In-service training takes place on the job after a firefighter completes initial training. In-service training assists firefighters in improving their job proficiency, learning new skills, and building on past experiences or theories. A well-defined training system will also concentrate on reiterating safety concerns. Although in-service training is required by some states for recertification, most fire departments primarily use it to expand on initial training and improve their professionalism of its members. Common skills, high frequency and low risk is what we're going to talk about now. Some drill subjects cover the basic operations in which every firefighter needs to be proficient, such as pump operations, driving, and self-contained breathing apparatus use. Now let's talk about target hazards, low frequency and high risk. Target hazards take special considerations with regard to safety, such as silo fires, zoo, and nuclear plant, among many others. Pre-planning with walkthroughs is vital to prepare yourself for potential hazards. Learning what specialized equipment is needed for a potential hazard and what is available from other agencies is also a good idea. One of the main problems with a low-frequency, high-risk event is the capacity for it to escalate out of your control. Another type of target hazard is a natural disaster, such as a tornado. Shelters, transportation, and fresh water are all longer-term concerns. Now let's talk about funding issues. Although much in-service training can be completed in-house, on the computer, and on duty, some cannot, such as conferences, medical classes, and specialized training. Training is an easy thing to kill in a budget when times get lean, especially special teams. Even easier to eliminate is travel to national conferences and fire academies, even though the most cutting-edge technology, theories, and practices are exposed at these events. Fundings can hurt safety directly by cutting positions in paid departments. In terms of accreditation, accreditation is awarded to certifying agencies, educational institutions, and programs that meet the criteria of the accrediting body. The accreditation process normally consists of 3 components: self-study, on-site visit, and report. One significant advantage to accredited programs in 2 different geographical locations is that reciprocity is very common. 2 major fire service accrediting bodies in the United States, each with its own rules, are the International Fire Service Accreditation Congress and the National Board on Fire Service Professional Qualifications. The International Fire Service Accreditation Congress, or the IFSAC, provides accreditation in the United States and internationally. There are 2 basic assemblies within the IFSAC, the Certificate Assembly and the Degree Assembly. The IFSAC's Certificate Assembly accredits certification programs that are based on a specific standard, such as NFPA 1001. The Degree Assembly of IFSAC accredits educational institutions for post-secondary degree programs. A unique characteristic of IFSAC is that it is both peer-driven and governed by its own members, i.e., no outside influences on the accreditation process. The National Board on Fire Service Professional Qualifications, which is the Pro Board, is another accreditation committee. In 2013, it offered accreditation for 85 levels of 18 NFPA standards. The committee also issues certificates to individuals who have completed the accreditation process or certification process from one of its accredited institutions and enters the information into their certificate database. Certifications from a Pro Board institution in one state are generally accepted in another state. Now let's discuss higher educational requirements. Some departments give incentives to further one's education or require it for promotion to administrative postings. Community colleges and universities offer associates, bachelor's, master's, and even PhD degrees in subjects that are related to our field, including fire service, fire protection systems, emergency management, public administration. Several of the degrees are becoming obtainable online. The variety, or many, of the higher education institutions have joined forces to ensure that the degrees they offer are comparable to each other and meet safety guidelines. The fire service also has higher education opportunities. You have the Executive Fire Officer Program. Business associations are also important in this whole atmosphere. And business associations are organizations used to advance the occupations of their members by offering training and contributing education. For an example, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. In addition to common initial training and certification for all of its levels in each state, including NFPA standards, there are other components of an ideal system that have proven successful that should be used as models to improve our national system. In terms of recertification requirements, many agencies certify individuals have moved to recertification. Some of the advantages of recertification include the ability to track who is currently the ability to track who is currently active, ensuring that continuing education or in-service training is occurring, and tracking the number of active individuals for statistical planning. In the future, standard certification requirements could require all emergency responders to obtain a specific number of hours in specific safety subjects, such as driver's education or risk management. Most people agree that without some sort of recertification process, our certifications are not worth quite as much. Now let's talk about the FESHE model. The Fire and Emergency Services Higher Education, or FESHE model, is one of the most inclusive models for the future of training and education to come out of the fire service. Last adopted in 2009, the model lays out the path for firefighter to progress to the next level of fire chief, and the model takes into account the total package of what training and education should include to create an effective leader. Although the U.S. Fire Administration, USFA, facilitates the meetings and annual conferences, fire and emergency services instructors are the driving force for the direction of this model. Now let's discuss tiered training. The proven method for training in special topics, those minimally covered in basic training, are the tiered system of training. For example, car seat installation. If a tiered system for car seat inspections were initiated, it would consist of awareness, operations, and technician level training. Now let's discuss credentialing. The September 11th attack demonstrated that some sort of credentialing would be necessary to prevent security issues in the future. This resulted in Presidential Directive 12. In 2004, President George W. Bush ordered the Department of Homeland Security to establish a system, the State Department, to identify and validate federal employees and contractors. First responder authentication credentials include credentials that have always been a part of emergency workers gaining access to certain locations. For first responders, credentialing has begun to take form as first responder authentication credentials. First responder authentication credentials. Credentials may also have the potential to make several aspects of emergency services safer and easier. Incident commanders could ascertain whether responders have the training to complete a task. Airport security screening for travel should be easier. According to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, credentialing, quote, helps ensure that both requester and supplier are using the same criteria to certify personnel, unquote. Now, in conclusion, one of the biggest challenges of improving safety in the fire service is to establish minimum training and certification standards. A critical step to improving safety is to ensure that everyone learns what we already know and then is encouraged to build upon it. There are successful models from educational systems that we can use to produce effective and safe lesson plans. We lack a coordinated effort to create minimum professional standards for volunteer firefighters, part-time firefighters, and career firefighters, regardless of the locations where they respond. And we also discussed standard credentialing, certification, and recertification that would provide the opportunity for safety to be interwoven into all aspects of training, making the entire fire service safer. Okay, let's summarize the points we covered in this chapter. First, the standard of care can be defined as the care one would expect to receive in a similar medical emergency in a similar geographical area. The chain of survival suggests that regardless of geographical location, medical patients need the same care for the best outcome. Ideally, standard of care would be the same as the chain of survival. Individual states, as we discussed, have their own methods of training and registering or certifying firefighters. There are variations for both volunteers and career firefighters with no national standard for initial training. Many organizations are working to establish minimum standards for training, including FESHA, IFSAC, and the Pro Board, as we discussed. Also, regarding of what state firefighters train in, most utilize the NFPA's professional qualification standards for content. JPRs define what a student needs to learn and complete when doing a specific duty, and the standard includes the knowledge, skills, and resources needed to meet requirements. We also discussed Bloom's taxonomy, which utilizes the 3 domains of learning: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. Effective training provides components of each. We also discussed in-service or continuing training, which is vital to improving job proficiency, learning new skills, and building on past experiences. Some departments have minimum exceptions for continuing education, and some states are getting minimum standards. Accreditation is an auditing process that a department or agency can request. If the organization meets the minimum criteria of the accrediting body, it can take advantage of benefits that the accreditation organization might offer. One such benefit is reciprocity. With business associations, they can advance the occupations of their members and offer training and continuing education on a national level. And finally, we talked about in the future, it is likely that many organizations will continue to bring training and recertification standards under one standard. Establishing a blueprint utilizing both education and training can benefit aspiring firefighters to plot out their goals. And lastly, we discussed that common standards for certification, such as FRACs, can also be beneficial for credentialing. This would allow emergency responders to gain access to regional, state, or even national emergencies. Okay, class, that's it for this chapter. As always, if you have any concerns or questions you need answered, please feel free to contact your instructor. Thank you for your time and attention. We'll see you next chapter.